1920, America was changing fast. Trains connected towns, letters crossed states, and families dreamed of new opportunities. But in Idaho, a story unfolded that no one could have imagined. A little girl, only 6 years old, became the most unusual package ever sent through the U.S. mail. She carried no suitcase, no ticket, only the trust of her family and a few stamps. Her journey was risky, her fate uncertain, and her story unforgettable. This is the tale of Charlotte May Pierstorff, the girl who traveled as mail. The year was 1920. America was still young, still stretching its arms across vast farmlands and railroad tracks. In Idaho, winters were long. Money was tight and families did what they could to survive. Among them was a little girl named Charlotte May Pierstorff, May to those who loved her most. She was 6 years old, bright-eyed and curious about the world. But her family faced a problem. They wanted May to visit her grandmother, who lived more than 70 miles away. A train ticket cost more than the family could afford. Every dollar mattered in those years, every penny stretched. But there was another option, one that today sounds impossible. In 1920, the U.S. Postal Service still allowed unusual items to be mailed, including in rare cases live animals. If a chicken or a pig could be sent by mail, why not a child? So May's parents made a daring choice. They pinned postage stamps to her coat, attached a tag with her grandmother's address, and sent her off as special delivery. It was not a suitcase she carried, nor a ticket in her hand, but the weight of trust in a system that promised delivery. On that cold Idaho morning, little May stepped aboard the train, unaware that her journey would become one of the most unbelievable stories in U.S. history. The day a child was mailed through the post. The morning train out of Grangeville was crowded with passengers bundled in heavy coats, carrying suitcases and baskets for the long ride. But among the travelers was one passenger unlike any other. A 6-year-old girl with a tag pinned to her coat, standing quietly beside the railway clerk. Instead of a ticket, she carried stamps, just 53 cents worth, enough to cover the cost of mailing a child to her grandmother. To the conductor and the mail clerks, Charlotte May Pierstorff wasn't just a passenger. She was a special delivery. Carefully, they guided her onto the train car reserved for mail. Around her were crates, sacks of letters, and packages bound for far-off towns. She sat small among the bundles, her wide eyes taking in the strange world of parcels and paper. Fellow passengers whispered when they noticed her. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others smiled gently, understanding the desperation of a family who couldn't afford a ticket but refused to give up on sending their child to loved ones. May herself seemed calm, clutching the address tag on her chest, trusting the adults around her. The train whistle shrieked, and with a surge of steam the journey began. Through valleys, snowy fields, and winding tracks, a little girl traveled as mail, a living story being written with every mile of track beneath her feet. As the train rattled across the frozen Idaho landscape, May's journey carried her deeper into history. For most passengers, the ride was routine. Businessmen reading newspapers, farmers carrying supplies, mothers rocking infants in their arms. But for May, seated in the company of clerks and parcels, it was an adventure wrapped in innocence. Railway mail clerks, used to sorting letters at lightning speed, kept a close watch over her. They treated her like the most precious package on board. To them, she wasn't just freight. She was a little girl with a destination and a family waiting. One clerk later described how May never cried or complained, only stared out the frosted window as the train thundered past forests and snowy hills. Yet behind the novelty of the moment was the harsh truth of why she was there. Her family couldn't afford a ticket. Times were tough in rural Idaho. The difference between a train fare and a few stamps could mean meals for a week. Mailing May was not a stunt, it was survival, a choice made in love, and in trust of a postal system that was still young and full of loopholes. Every mile carried her closer to her grandmother's home. Every stop reminded others that this was no ordinary delivery. May Pierstorff was living, proof that even the most ordinary rules can carry the most extraordinary stories. By the second day of her journey, word had spread among train passengers and station workers about the little girl traveling with stamps instead of a ticket. At every stop, curious eyes followed May as she sat quietly in the care of the railway mail clerks. Some passengers whispered in disbelief, calling it irresponsible. Others smiled softly, touched by the innocence of a child whose family simply wanted her safe in her grandmother's arms. The train pulled through small Idaho towns, Lapwai, Lewiston, and beyond. Farmers loading cargo stared at the unusual sight. A child with an address tag, treated like registered mail. Postal regulations still allowed such oddities, but this was pushing the boundaries of the system. Few could believe it was legal, and yet, here she was, safely traveling hundreds of miles under the protection of the U.S. mail. May's journey highlighted not just her family's poverty, but the deep trust Americans placed in the Postal Service during the early 20th century. For many, the mail was more reliable than the railroads, safer than strangers, and backed by the U.S. government. To May's parents, it wasn't recklessness, and it was faith in a system that promised delivery, no matter the package. As the train chugged forward, May grew closer to her destination, unaware that her unusual trip would become one of the most famous and unbelievable stories in U.S. postal history. As the train pushed deeper into Idaho, May's unusual delivery became the talk of the rail line. Conductors, clerks, and even strangers began to treat her with extra care, as though protecting a secret treasure. Some offered her an apple or a sweet. Others simply smiled, amazed at the bravery of a 6-year-old, traveling alone with nothing but postage pinned to her coat. Every stop brought her closer to her grandmother's home. The snowy fields of rural Idaho rolled past her window, quiet and endless, while the mail clerks kept her close at hand. To them, she wasn't just another parcel. She was a responsibility, a symbol of trust in the U.S. Postal Service. Even hardened railway workers admitted they had never seen anything like it. Back in Grangeville, neighbors whispered about the decision. Some called it reckless, others ingenious, but in truth it reflected the struggles of countless American families of the era. Life in 1920 was hard. Choices weren't always about what was ideal, but about what was possible. For May's parents, sending her as mail wasn't cruelty. It was love expressed in the only way they could afford. By now, the story of the mailed girl had traveled faster than the train itself. And as May neared the end of her remarkable journey, she carried with her not just a parcel tag, but a place in history that no letter or package could ever equal. At last, the train slowed as it approached May's final stop. The long miles of track behind her had carried not just packages and letters, but a story no one would ever forget. On the platform, her grandmother waited anxiously, scanning the crowd. And then she saw her and a little girl in a wool coat, stepping down from the mail car, postage tag still pinned proudly to her chest. The reunion was simple yet unforgettable. A grandmother's embrace, a child's tired smile, and the relief of knowing she had arrived safely. The clerks handed her over like precious cargo delivered at last. In that moment, Charlotte May Pierstorff was no longer just a little girl from Idaho. She was history, the child who traveled by mail. News of her journey spread quickly, making headlines across the country. The U.S. Postal Service, embarrassed by the loophole, soon closed the rule that had allowed it. From then on, no human, no matter how small, could be sent as a package. May's trip became the last of its kind, a story retold for generations as both charming and unthinkable. Today, her tale lives on as one of the most unusual chapters in U.S. postal history, a reminder of a time when families stretched every penny, when rules bent under desperation, and when a little girl's journey proved that sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. Dear friends, what you just heard is only one of many secrets time has hidden. Join loading, and together we'll unlock more real stories of the past. Don't miss what history never wanted you to remember.